Well, you were trying to get answers on oil, and we're going to try to get some more regarding the commodity and Venezuela with Brian Sullivan this morning at HQ with a look at what some of the oil majors are saying, or maybe more importantly, Brian, not saying about their future.
Yeah, what they're not saying, Carl, is that they're going to be going into Venezuela anytime soon. Spent the weekend talking to pretty much every oil company out there, industry sources, government officials, even members of OPEC. Here's the reality. And a lot of the oil complex, which you guys have shown so well, is indeed on the move. You look at a Valero, that's higher. Schlumberger, Halliburton, Baker Hughes, Chevron, Phillips 66, all those stocks are indeed moving higher. But I want to be very, very clear in my reporting over the weekend. This is a country that is still, I don't want to say leaderless, but it's unclear effectively. Delcy Rodriguez currently in charge. What will happen? This is a country whose oil infrastructure is largely rusted and has come way, way down. This is not a situation where suddenly tomorrow you're going to have an Exxon or a ConocoPhillips or somebody else say, guys, we've decided now with the president's urging that we are going to be going into Venezuela. That is simply not going to happen. Obviously, Chevron is there as a joint venture with PDVSA right now. Venezuela putting out about 800 to 900,000 barrels a day. Folks, that's about 0.8% of global oil output. And the other thing I would add is that OPEC is Venezuela is a founding member of OPEC. OPEC has quotas on certain nations. Venezuela not in that group of 8, so to speak, that is kind of doing things on their own. They had a meeting yesterday, Sunday, they're meeting about oil output and quotas. But Venezuela, as a founding member of OPEC, is subject to what they call their declaration of cooperation, where they kind of set their output goals. I'm not trying to throw cold water on the Venezuela story. What I am trying to report, and what I am reporting, I should say, is that this concept going around that suddenly Exxon is going to show up or ConocoPhillips is going to show up in Venezuela tomorrow is simply not true. David Faber, you know very well, Guyana. Exxon is very much involved in that offshore platform, billions of dollars of investment. We're talking about a country that would require, if not a decade, close to it, tens of billions of dollars of investment. And if it does begin, it will begin with the Schlumbergers, the Halliburton, and the Baker Hugheses of the world, because to build out any extra oil output, you first need to modernize and invest in the guts, the infrastructure of oil, and that are the services names. That is why they are up very quickly. Why Valero's up is because the Venezuelan oil is very thick. It is very sludgy. If indeed there is some kind of increase in output, that oil would likely be shipped to America and refined by likely a Valero, which has the capability to refine the heavier crude that would ultimately be turned into diesel.
Right. It used to go apparently to Aruba. There was the largest refinery in the world on Aruba.
And St. Croix.
It doesn't operate anymore for that Venezuelan oil, as you point out, back when obviously the Chevrons and the others were operating in the country at a fuller level. I mean, to your point, Brian, and you're reporting here, obviously speaking to a lot of people. I mentioned a conversation I had with somebody who was in the country not long ago. The state of disrepair is appalling. The pipelines, the pumping stations, the power, all of it needing to be rebuilt. And the question they ask, and the one I know you're raising as well, is how are you going to do that without some sort of massive security guarantee from the U.S.? And what does that really look like, especially if you get a change in administration in 2028 that has a different approach?
That's exactly right. And people I talked to also over the weekend, David, said if this was going to happen, if this was purely an oil play, why would this capture, if you will, of Maduro not occurred in 2019 in the first Trump term when the oil infrastructure was less bad, when output was higher? Remember, former President Joe Biden put a $25 million bounty on Maduro's head earlier in 2025 before he left office. So we've been talking about removing Maduro or having Maduro leave or whatever terminology you want to use for a number of years. Why now? This is not some immediate oil play. The oil company stocks are popping on this idea, maybe that, to your point, you will get this investment at the early stages to try to modernize it. Two big questions: who pays for it? And that security guarantee, David, that you talked about. If you're going to bring down a couple hundred or a couple thousand American or Western nation workers to go down and improve this, you better darn well make sure that they are safe, they have housing. And Venezuela right now, and probably for months or years to come, is not a nation that anybody is going to describe as stable.
Yeah, a lot of parallels to Iraq, where you had a lot of party loyalists. You got to pay them or fight them somehow to make sure that your investments can take place. Brian, we'll talk soon. Brian Sullivan, thanks.